So, Fred, you mentioned to me some things about the book of Revelation, and we want to get into a couple of different topics. One is just the sort of the madness of adultery that's happening, the judgment that's coming in the tribulation, and the great prostitute Babylon. What is that? And let's just talk through some of those things.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific scripture that's on your mind you wanted to start with? I mean, one of the scriptures that's on my mind is Revelation 17. You were mentioning Revelation 19. Why don't we start off with Revelation 17?
Yeah,
and then
sounds
get
good.
to the.
I'll give you my thoughts on the other ones.
It's Revelation 17. This is near the end of the bowls of God's wrath. The trumpets have already been blown. The seals have been broken. There has been just great amounts of wrath being poured out on the earth. I personally believe that the church has been raptured at this point. We're in heaven. There's this 7-year period, this little respite that believers have. I think the wedding supper of the Lamb is during that time. But meanwhile, as believers that have been raptured or in heaven, there is total chaos and wrath, the winepress of God's fury being poured out on the earth. But something interesting that's come up, it came up in our conversation yesterday, and also I was thinking about it over the weekend, teaching in Genesis. But Revelation 17 says, "One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries.' Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 7 horns." So I think, it's pretty clear the woman is, and it says in verse 18, the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. The 10 horns here definitely represent that Babylon, and so Babylon is the prostitute, and Babylon is a sort of a mega conglomerate federation of nations. It's not even, it's more than a nation, right? It's a sort of a federation of nations that come together during that time and have certain qualities about them, and one is that they are intoxicated with the wine of adultery.
Yeah. And then what translation is that?
I apologize. This is the NIV.
Okay,
so
yeah. Because ESV is sexual immorality, which is a translation, another variant of that. What's interesting, I was reading Revelation a week ago or so, and growing up, and even up to a few years back, when I used to read about Revelation, with the punishment and the vengeance and the sexual immorality, I remember used to think like, sex outside of marriage is bad. It's all sinful. I'm not condoning it at all. Adultery, but growing up, I always thought adultery, sex out of marriage, that's a severe punishment for that, and that's God's will. It makes sense because it's a sin, but looking at it in the context of today and going forward where we will be, it makes a lot more sense to me. In that, like, if you like, when I looked at Revelation 19:2, it's like, because his judgments are true and righteous, because he has passed judgment on the great prostitute who corrupted the earth with her sexual immorality. Mm-hmm. Like, prior to where we are now, that seemed like, I guess it was the sin was more hidden, or my categories were sex outside of marriage, adultery, and then a small percentage was same sex. Because that's kind of how it seemed, until just recently. Now, with the way the world is going, everyone's coming out, everyone's same-sex, everyone's transgender. Now they're trying to influence the kids, and it just makes a lot more sense in that context. It's like who corrupted the earth with their sexual immorality. It's like, it's very like Sodom and Gomorrah. Chuck Missler used to say, "Oh, if God doesn't punish America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah." But at least prior to recent, it was more hidden. You didn't go around, and sexual immorality wasn't just in your face, maybe through commercials, or it was a I'll say a hidden sin almost, but now it's just blatantly out there. Now it's closer, moving towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and that in Sodom and Gomorrah, it was very public.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming very public.
Yeah.
And I could imagine just 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's going to be the norm. Right? And so when I read, like in Revelation, it mentions sexual immorality. I was looking 14 times. And it just makes a lot more sense to me now in the context of where we're going.
So when you're saying it's more public, I think one of the things I think you're saying or where you're going with it is it's one thing to have sexual immorality. Let's say it's even same-sex attraction. Like if it's two adults, they have sex, the Bible certainly calls that an abomination. It's not God's design. God's design is between a male and a female in holy matrimony, being married. So, but, sexual immorality with two people that are not married is called adultery, but it takes a whole new level of sin, and even what it seems to be as a different level of judgment, worthy of judgment, when it begins to affect kids.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, Jesus said, well, there are, and that's one of those misunderstandings. A lot of people say, well, all sin is sin. But actually, that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, there's levels.
There's different levels of sin. Jesus even said that somebody doing one thing might be guilty of a greater sin. Where they get that is from James. It says if you've broken one law, you've broken all of it. And people say, okay, well, sin is sin. But no, actually, there are sins that affect, especially a sin that would affect a kid. Like Jesus said, anyone who causes one of these little ones to stumble is, they might as well have a millstone tied around their neck and thrown into the sea.
Yeah.
So there is a difference when sexual sin, in general, it's sinning against yourself, your own body, and it's sinning against God. But involving minors with a sort of sexualization of children, that's a different level, because the sin is no longer just against your own body and against God, a holy God. It's now a sin against a child.
Yeah.
And it is worthy of
it's a
harsh judgment and punishment.
Yeah, it seems a lot, the judgment seems a lot more deserved, I guess, in the context of where we're going. Even Revelation 21:8, if you look at that one, right, but as for the cowards and unbelievers, detestable persons, and murderers, and sexually immoral people, and the sorcerers and idolaters, and all the liars, right? Mm-hmm. Think about, and before it was like everybody lies. Is that like, everyone falls in that category?
Right.
But now in the context of today, it's like all the people that are ignoring truth, and choosing to follow falseness, right, and false truths, and they're, a man can be a woman, and a woman can be a man. That's a lie too. Yeah. Like, you're lying to yourselves, and so now it's like more context of all the liars. It's like it's not just I told you a white lie, that's a sin, but it's like I am blatantly ignoring the truth. Yeah, I'm lying to myself, and I'm lying to everybody else about. Right. And that's where it seems the world's going.
And it's not to say that and we want to be clear that we're all sinners, right? Yes, we all are sinners. We all need Jesus. Everybody has fallen short of the glory of God. But even in a nation, though, so you have a nation that, for example, the nation of America, we have, in some ways, Judeo-Christian values, like our laws are based on even the basic laws of, like, the Ten Commandments. But when you begin embracing things that, like to take, for example, like you said, suppressing the truth of that there is male and female biologically. I mean, science, take religion, take Christianity, take the Bible out of it. Biologically, there is a clear distinction between male and female. Yeah. I mean, just look at the reproductive system. Like, women have a uterus, right? They can carry a child, they can feed a child. Yeah. There's a clear difference. So when we have a nation that begins to suppress the truth and embrace perversion, and that's what it is. It's when lust, it's unrestrained lust. So when lust begins to, it's like anything. If it's a drug, you want more. If it's, fast food, you just want more and more and more, and you never have your fill.
And we're at a point where the feelings are more important. Like, well, that's what you feel like you should do, then you should do that.
Right, and then sex is that way. So now to the point where, there's never enough. So you begin to define yourself as an animal, right? Like, wolfies, or, like defining yourself as a cat. You're calling yourself as a cat. That's the slippery slope. That's where unrestrained lust has led a nation. Yeah. And it's like, it's deserving of judgment. And it's not that we are any better than anyone, but we're just pointing out that God has a design, and he has even a design for redemption through Jesus Christ, but he has a design for families. He has a design for male, female, men being the leaders of the homes, wives being the helpmates, sort of.
My mom made a good point too. I was talking to my mom, and she was saying, and I've seen this too. I agree with her. Like, all of the people that have had the surgeries and became, got removed their parts or added parts or did the surgery basically. Like, you don't see any of them where they're happy about it. They all regret it. They all say it was a mistake. And, my mom equates it to a parent and a child. You tell your child not to do certain things. It's not because you're trying to control them. It's because you know what the outcome's going to be. And so just like God gives us the choice, but he says, you are a man, you are a woman, for the purpose of, he knows, look, if you try to become that thing, you're never going to be happy. It's going to be worse for you. Yeah. And he's just trying to keep you from doing that to yourself, right? And that's why he gives the rules, is to protect you.
Right. God knows how he's designed us, and that's very clear. In Genesis 1:26, God made male and female in his image. Yeah. And male and female, he created them. And then he said, let them cleave together, let them leave his father and mother, let them be united as one. He also gave the command to be fruitful and multiply. Yeah. I think it's like I think we should talk just a second on that. Is like, is it, to me, it's wrapping an identity around sex. Like, why do we, our identity, that's what blows my mind, especially now. Maybe when I was like a teenager, I was thinking about sex all the time. Yeah. Now that I'm in my 40s,
it's not your primary way to identify.
We're not thinking about sex 24 hours a day, but it's like, you think of just sort of like, why is it an identity? Like, God's purpose for sex, we have these desires. It is pleasurable, but really the purpose of sex is reproduction. Be fruitful and multiply. So we take this sort of created thing and worship it, right? And we turn it into something it's not.
And you think of the same sex, like if Satan's can convince people for same-sex relationships, that's generations of bloodlines that have been cut off that God would have intended for good. Like, you've just cut off generations of a bloodline, the generations of a line of family, by not having the kids that you should have had.
I mentioned there's a lady named Rachel Gilson. She was saved at Yale, and her her freshman year at Yale in college or undergraduate, she was, formerly an atheist, and she was in a same-sex relationship. She got saved, and, one of the things she said, like, who owns me? Is it my desires, or is it my Lord? Right. I was listening to a lecture she was giving at Evangelical Theological Society, and she was talking about, now she's married to a man, and she has at least one child, and she still even struggles with same-sex attraction, but it's not something that's beyond God's ability to redeem. And it's not to say that every person with same-sex attraction has to get married to the opposite sex. No, like, celibacy is okay. In fact, we can serve the Lord in a greater way if we're not married. Bible says that, we don't.
Yeah, and it's not even the feeling that's a sin, like her same sex. It's the acting on it. Right. It's like everyone's got weird thoughts and things that they think about they shouldn't do, but if you're gonna act on it, that's like the sin. Right. It's like
Right. We all have, and that's why God gives us His Spirit, self-control.
There's one other verse I wanted to pull out too. Think about today. Now all the commercials, the corporations are starting to move in that woke direction, and advertising and to this minority in this of sexual immorality everywhere. And again, reading through Revelations, like more and more of these just stuck out to me as like, this makes a lot more sense. Revelation 18:3, if you look at that one, for all nations have drunk from the wine of of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality with her, and the merchants, right, the corporations, and the merchants of the earth have become rich from the power of her sensuality. Like reading that, I was like, that's Nike, that's right, that's Target now, right, with the tuck bikini. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it makes a lot more sense now. Because before it was like, I don't know. I always thought, well, is it because 10 years ago, it's like, is it because they're selling sex on TV?
Yeah.
Like, but now it just makes a lot more sense.
That's interesting. You pointed that out, and actually in the NIV it says, the maddening wine of her adulteries, and the merchants of the earth grow rich from her excessive luxuries.
Yeah, it's just like it just makes a lot more sense now.
Seeing, I think it's interesting, the backlash. At least you are seeing some, in America like right now, we have the freedom of speech to at least say this is not the way that we believe, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder what percentage it is of people who buy into this, to the woke agenda. I mean,
I think it's a small number. I think the problem we have is most people that are conservative or Christian or just conservative, not even non-Christian, we just don't care to make a fuss about it. Yeah. Like we've always been like, do what you want over there in your own house, just leave me alone. Mm-hmm. And if you want to go riot or protest over there, we just mind our own business and do our thing, right? And then so I think they're so loud. They're the minority, but they're so loud and so aggressive. And I think we're the majority, but we're very I think it baffles us to think like you're really going through that much trouble to do that thing. So yeah, I think it's harder for us to boycott or push back because we're not built like that. I don't think.
Well, we're just we're hardworking people providing for our families, and we're not trying to infiltrate. Like that's what's happening, and that's the biggest issue right now. Is to me, like you're saying, it's one thing. Your sexual sin, I mean, that's everywhere. Like, and you sin, just against your own body, whatever. But when it becomes to infiltrate and indoctrinate children,
push in on the kids.
That's the issue.
Yeah, like, commercialized now. It's like now you see same sex on commercials. It's just going extreme. Like it's trying to, you have to think that way or you're incorrect, right? And that's the lie, right? All the liars that Revelation talks about makes more sense to me now.
And it's a lie that's going to fulfill you, that identity is going to define you. I mean, you see the pain, of, like, it doesn't matter, the best sex within heterosexuality, it's never going to fulfill, right? Like, God hasn't designed sex to fulfill us or to define us or to be our identity, right? Like, we are built to glorify God, to enjoy God. Like that's where satisfaction comes from, And I always love the phrase John Piper says that God is most glorified when we are most satisfied in Him. The meaning, like satisfied with how He's created us. Like if God has created us a man, it doesn't mean you have to be super masculine and, like there are feminine men. I get it. Like there are ladies who are more masculine, and that's okay. Like. Enjoy the person God's created you to be. Embrace that.
Yeah, there are exceptions to the norm, and we're fine. And we've always embraced that. Like it's perfectly fine.
Exactly. Like where it becomes an issue is you start, trying to brainwash children for one, like, why do children need to be thinking about sex anyways?
Or race, right? Same thing. Yeah.
Like don't even think about race. There isn't.
Yeah. My kids don't know anything about sex. Don't know anything about race. They don't know the difference between a black kid and a white kid. They're just like it's a kid.
It's a human being.
It's a human being.
Different from animals, right?
Yeah.
Male, female.
Yeah.
And like I agree. Like we don't need to be talking about those things. That's like what good parents would do. We'd let them have fun, embrace creativity, especially with their kids. Help them avoid like. You've seen all these studies about mental health issues with kids and like the effect of social media. And it's like we're seeing that. Like we like get our kids outside, get our kids, keep them creative, music, coloring, working with your hands, these different things.
Yeah, we're hoping we can keep them off the phone for as long as possible. Yeah. Like, perfect would be when they're 18, but I'm not sure that's going to be possible.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to some extent, but it's the constant sort of shots of, serotonin and, that these phones, the notifications and all that they do to us. But
if something embarrassing happens to you, that's it. Everyone knows.
Yeah, the cyberbullying.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it's a whole different level. What else? I mean, Romans 1.
Yeah, for me it was I was just amazed, like reading back through Revelation. It just seemed to hit home more, like God's gonna pour His vengeance on all the sexual immorality and all the people and all the liars that are just blinding themselves.
So Romans mentions this, and it says, "The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power, His divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." And this sort of goes on, it defines what we've been talking about. It describes it. It says, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified Him as God nor gave thanks to Him, but their thinking became futile." That's exactly what we're saying, madness, right? But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, and we see that everywhere, they're saying this is science, and it's not, right? They became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings, birds, animals, and reptiles. Therefore God gave them over to the sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. And it talks about, then it rolls into homosexuality, right?
Yeah.
And a couple of things there. One is the design of God, the clarity of God's truth is plain. It's plain to everyone, right? But people suppress the truth, claiming to be wise, and they suppress the truth. And in doing so, they basically are exchanging and worshiping created things rather than the Creator, right?
Yeah.
They exchange the truth for a lie. And there are many lies, cultural lies right now that we're believing, that not we, but in general, like even corporate America, like Target is believing the cultural lie that just because someone says they're a woman, that they think they're a woman in their brain, in their minds, their minds are not thinking clearly about science.
And they think it's right for society. Like, the Target CEO just said, I think, and this is right for society.
Right.
It's like, it's just amazing that that's the direction that they're going in.
Yeah, and I don't. So what do we do? I mean, I think
over time, I still think Christianity, like true Christianity, not progressive Christianity, but true Christianity, I think is going to get smaller and smaller over time. Like 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, 50 years from now, when our kids are old, Christianity might be underground. I think eventually Christianity has to go underground. There's no way. Because of the way the world's going, we'll become the minority.
Yeah.
That'll be the norm. And if you don't think in that way, right, you're ostracized, you're out, and becomes a hate speech. Yeah. Jesus is the only way, you're only a man. That's, eventually they'll pass that. Eventually that'll get through as a hate speech. And that's the goal of Satan.
Yeah.
And I think that, we keep praying, hope for some type of revival, right? But I think that based on reading that, based looking at Sodom and Gomorrah, based on like the world to be as it was in Noah, it always leads me down the path of any true Christians are meeting in secret.
Yeah.
And that's the norm. It's like all that stuff.
I think you're right. I think it seems to be the writing on the wall. That's sort of, a lot of people said we're like usually 20 years behind Europe and England and these different areas, and they're definitely seeing there are still some faithful churches there.
Yeah. And maybe when the rapture comes, maybe the rapture is not as. We think of the rapture today, it'd be like millions and millions and millions of people probably disappear, right? Or millions of people disappear all around the globe. Maybe the time the rapture comes, it's like maybe people don't notice that much. It's like 1 million people disappeared.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just speculating, but maybe it's not as.
But I think kind of what I was getting at is like, what do we do? on a individual level, I think we go back to God's design.
Yeah.
We be fruitful and multiply, right? Like men, love your wives, find a wife, love your wife, have kids,
and still those values in the kids. Yeah.
Right. Raise your kids to the glory of God. And work hard. Like and doesn't mean we have to have some kind of like. Doesn't mean a wife can't work.
Right.
But I mean, or things like that. But I mean, God's, there's nothing like having a happy home. You know, I think I heard Matt Walsh say something yesterday. He's like, life is all about how your wife greets you when you come home from work.
Yeah.
There's like so much truth to that. Yeah. Like if if we're working hard together, and I know it's not like this with every family. Like there's with our economy, but there's nothing like a hard day's work. And coming home and your wife is like cooking a meal and your kids are laughing and
of course nowadays you don't come home, you spin around in your office chair and you walk into the next room. But yeah, I think it
almost sounds chauvinistic.
Yeah.
But it's not.
I can vouch for that with Tiffany and I. I mean, Tiffany used to work full time. Then when we had the kids, we slowly transitioned to her being a stay-at-home mom, and I think over just in general our relationship has gotten better. I think the house is better.
Yeah.
Like she's focused on the house, the kids. I'm focusing on providing what they need, and it's just you're right. It works. It's a very good yin yang, or with the
it's like and you have 2 sets of twins. You have 4 kids at home, like under the age of 5 or something.
Yeah, 2 5s and 2 2-year-olds.
I mean, and imagine like crazy. The amount of empathy and relational sort of dynamics she has with the kids. And like how hard it would be right now for her to go work full time.
Yeah,
and it's like
hard. And then you have to put the kids in daycare.
Yeah.
And now somebody else is teaching them, and you don't know what they're doing. And you hear all those daycare stories, horror stories, like kids are getting beat up or hit. And
again, I don't want to make single moms feel bad. I don't want to make sort of people who are having to work 2 jobs. It's like, but like understanding that God has created roles for men and women. And to stick with it, like don't just divorce each other because sex isn't good, or because, you're not happy. Like how many people get a divorce because they're not happy?
Yeah.
Like if you're not happy, now, like in the situation you're in, you're never going to be happy, right? Like
you got to make sure those kids are raised right.
Yeah, raise your kids right. Deny yourself. Take up your cross. Be involved in a church. I mean, especially for single moms and how important it is to have
support
other men. Right. For all of our kids, like get our kids, around other godly men, women. Glorify God with their bodies and the design. God has designed us, male, female, equal but complementary. That's the idea. We complement one another. And for those who continue to reject God's design, judgment is coming, right? Like.
Yeah.
I pray that everyone finds Jesus, repents of sin, turns to Jesus. That's our hope.
That's our hope.
It's our hope for a nation is that there is a revival of the gospel, of people turning to Jesus, repenting of sin, getting back to
so many will be
God's
deceived.
design for life, right?
Yeah.